There was a time in football when you could score the winner on Saturday and pick the team for next weekend by Monday, when one man could be both the dressing room leader and the one handing out fines for being late to training. It was a strange, glorious era, the age of the player-manager. And if you were a football fan in the 80s or 90s, you'll remember when it didn't seem all that unusual for the club's star player to also be calling the shots from the dugout. But these days, you're never going to see Harry Kane juggling penalty duties and post-match press conferences, or Virgil van Dijk picking the starting 11 before leading the defense. So what happened? Why did football's player managers disappear, and who were the best of them when the role was still alive? Let's rewind. In football's earlier decades, the idea of a player doubling up as manager wasn't that odd. Back then, coaching staffs were small, sometimes just a manager, an assistant, and a physio who doubled as kitman. If a senior player had tactical nous and leadership qualities, he could naturally step up. It was also a financial move, one salary, two roles. By the 70s and 80s, plenty of experienced pros were taking on the job, often as a way to ease into management without immediately retiring. It was football's version of learning on the job, and sometimes it produced brilliance. If you're talking player managers, there's only one place to start: King Kenny. When Joe Fagan retired in 1985, Liverpool turned to Kenny Dalglish, already the club's talisman and a living legend. At 34, he became player manager, inheriting a dressing room full of stars, expectation and pressure. His response? In his first season, Dalglish led Liverpool to the league and FA Cup double, the first in the club's history. He was still scoring vital goals, including the title clincher against Chelsea. What made Dalglish reign so impressive was his balance: a cool head, quiet authority, and a deep understanding of what made that Liverpool side tick. Under him, Liverpool won 3 league titles and 2 FA Cups before he resigned in 1991. Dalglish didn't just manage, he defined what it meant to be a player manager: calm, respected, and relentlessly successful. While Dalglish ruled England, another Liverpool legend was tearing up the rulebook in Scotland. In 1986, Graeme Souness became player manager of Rangers, and what followed changed Scottish football forever. He immediately began signing big English names like Terry Butcher, Chris Woods, and Trevor Steven, taking advantage of the ban on English clubs in Europe at the time. It was audacious, expensive, and groundbreaking. Souness made Rangers dominant again, winning 3 league titles and 4 domestic cups in 5 years. He was still putting himself in midfield too, crunching into tackles, getting sent off in his first match against Hibs, and proving he hadn't mellowed a bit. Off the pitch, he turned Rangers into a modern professional powerhouse. He wasn't just managing games, he was reshaping the club. The Souness revolution showed that a player manager could be more than a caretaker. They could be a visionary. By the early 90s, football in England was changing, and Glenn Hoddle was one of the few visionaries ready to bring it into a new era. At Swindon Town, he became player manager in 1991 and guided the club to their first ever promotion to the Premier League 2 years later, playing beautiful possession-based football. He was still dictating games from midfield while managing from the sidelines, a rare combination of artistry and authority. When Chelsea came calling in 1993, Hoddle took his methods to Stamford Bridge. He introduced double training sessions, diet control, and a continental playing style, years before Arsene Wenger arrived in England. Under Hoddle, Chelsea reached the 1994 FA Cup final, their first major final in over 20 years. He laid the foundation for the modern, cosmopolitan Chelsea we know today, and inspired players like his 2 successors to follow in his footsteps. Hoddle was the thinking man's player manager. Less shouting, more strategy. When Ruud Gullit arrived at Chelsea, he was already a global superstar, a Ballon d'Or winner, a European champion, and one of the coolest men alive. He joined Chelsea as a player in 1995, then became player manager a year later when Hoddle left. In 1997, he led Chelsea to their first FA Cup win in 26 years, ending decades of frustration. He introduced flair, professionalism, and international credibility to English football. Under him, Chelsea signed big names like Gianfranco Zola, Roberto Di Matteo, and Frank Leboeuf, players who would shape the club's future. Gullit didn't just win a trophy, he changed the image of Chelsea completely. He was sacked in 1998, but by then, the baton had already passed to another Italian icon. Gianluca Vialli, becoming Chelsea's third consecutive player manager. Vialli took over as player manager at 33 and won the Cup Winners' Cup, League Cup, and Super Cup within 2 seasons, while still occasionally playing up front. He combined tactical smarts with dressing room warmth, earning respect from both veterans and newcomers. Together, Gullit and Vialli made Chelsea the blueprint for the modern cosmopolitan Premier League club. All in all, David Webb, who departed the club in May 1993, was the final permanent conventional dugout manager, until the appointment of Claudio Ranieri in September 2000. Few roles capture the beautiful chaos of 90s football quite like Bryan Robson at Middlesbrough. When Robbo took charge in 1994, fresh from being released by Manchester United, he was still playing occasionally, though by then, his knees were on borrowed time. As player manager, he led Borough into the Premier League, signed international stars like Juninho, Emerson, and Fabrizio Ravanelli, and moved the club into the brand new Riverside Stadium. It was a thrilling time. Borough reached both domestic cup finals in 1997 and 1998, the FA Cup and the League Cup, the latter being whilst playing in the second tier. The highs were electric, the lows were painful, but Robson's influence on Middlesbrough was enormous. He'd turned a modest provincial club into one of the most talked about sides in England, and when he finally retired as a player, it marked the symbolic end of an era. He was, in many ways, the last truly high-profile British player-manager of the modern age. By the 2000s, the role had all but vanished from the top leagues in English football, and for good reason. Football had simply become too complex. Where once a manager could run a club with an assistant and a notepad, now you need data analysts, sports scientists, set-piece coaches, psychologists, and nutritionists. You can't play 90 minutes on Saturday and spend Sunday analyzing expected goals. The UEFA Pro license requirements also made it harder. Modern managers must complete years of training, something a current player can't realistically balance. And then, there's the money. Players today are multi-million-pound assets, too valuable for clubs to risk burning out with the pressure of managing as well. Add in the 24-hour media scrutiny, and it's clear why the role died out. Imagine a player today trying to manage their teammates while also starring in documentaries, brand deals, and press conferences. It just wouldn't work. There have been a few brief modern revivals. Ryan Giggs was technically a player-manager for a few games at Manchester United in 2014, guiding the team to a win in his debut as caretaker. Vincent Kompany took on the same dual role at Anderlecht in 2019, before quickly realizing the demands were impossible and stepping back to focus on playing. And Wayne Rooney briefly balanced both roles at Derby County before retiring to go full-time in the dugout. All of them discovered the same truth: what once worked in football's simpler days is now almost impossible. Still, the spirit of the player-manager hasn't completely vanished, and in the more modern setting of England's vast non-league system, it's still particularly common. The player-manager might be mainly gone now in the higher echelons of football, but the idea of the player as leader, as tactician, motivator, and example will never die. So why don't we see player managers anymore? Because football evolved. It got bigger, richer, smarter, and more specialized, but in doing so, it lost one of its most fascinating roles: the ultimate multitasker, the warrior general who could score the goal and pick the team sheet. The player manager belonged to a time when football was raw, chaotic, and beautifully human. When leaders led by instinct, not analytics. We might never see another Dalglish, Souness, or Robson on the touchline in shin pads again, but for those who lived through it, it was football at its most charismatic. The player manager, part captain, part coach. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to support our work, you can buy me a coffee. Just scan the QR code on the screen. And of course, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Retro Football Club, and hit that notification bell so you never miss what's coming next.